Hey everybody, Rosematter here. Welcome to part 3 of my Steins Gate Zero Let's Play. In the last episode, Okabe got to speak to the Amadeus Kirisu, and as expected, it feels like it's going to affect him negatively. Whether he can get closure from this, or he's going to become obsessed with her, remains to be seen, but already we're seeing things like he is ignoring his friends, talking about like what he's going to talk to Kirisu about next. There was a mention about like, can you overwrite people's memories? And she said that she'd be able to know when that happens. Also the fact that she can lie, she's capable of lying or omitting truths. That'll be interesting as well. But maybe it's a matter of like, the more I talk to her, the more I'm going to go down that path of like becoming obsessive, like forgetting about my real world friends and just talking to her. Maybe that is going to just like affect his mental state. But another important thing is that one of Mayuri's friends, I believe her name is Fubuki, she actually has been having flashbacks or premonitions, images, just seeing Mayuri die and all the times that she died in the Alpha worldline, I believe, which shouldn't be possible because like they're on the Beta worldline. She shouldn't be killed because they aren't building the time machine. There's no reason for Mocha to kill her. So that must be some weird kind of crossover. And also like, why would Mayuri's friend who wasn't there for these things, why would she have these images of these events that happened in another timeline? So that's very interesting. So yeah, we're going to get back to it. That's where we left off, was the friend talking about seeing Mayuri die over and over. Hopefully that will not be, a sign of things to come, but only one way to find out. Let's get back into the story and let's see what happens next. Alright, so now, Suzuha Mane was about to run out of patience. The cause was the young man in the room with her father, Itaro Hashida, aka Daru. His massively obese body was leaning forward over a computer monitor, and he had a dopey grin on his face. He'd finally gotten up around 11 a.m., gulped down 3 cups of instant ramen, and now was surfing the internet. Nope, let's check the tips. Parthenon, a female freelance illustrator, she primarily does illustrations for Nikonia video and Vocalo songs and is mostly popular with young women. Normies Must Die P, a Vocalo producer, 2 of his videos have exceeded over 1 million views. Popular for the unique worlds he builds with his lyrics, as his name suggests, many of his songs criticize normies, or criticize himself for not having friends. His songs are a source of support for viewers in similar dire straits. His songs always feature images by the same illustrator, Parthenon, and her cute illustrations are another source of popularity. Oh, tweeter. It's not called that anymore. A little behind the times. Also, I know that I compared like @chan to like Reddit, but it's 4chan. It's like a knockoff of 4chan. But I've never gone on 4chan before. I'm afraid to. The name of a microblogging software app allows for tweets up to 140 characters in length. Tweets from another user you follow can be viewed in a timeline, allowing for it to be used as a chat program.
僕としたことが出遅れた。これまでの流れをちゃんとチェックしないと。
父さん。
はい。
That's what Suzuha called her father. It's who he was after all, so there was nothing else to call him. Suzuha was a time traveler from the year 2036, and 7 years from now he would become her father.
いい加減にしなよ。一日中ゴロゴロして食べるかネットを見るかゲームをしてるかばっかり。即席麺やお菓子ばかり食べてると体に病変を生じるって警告しても治そうともしない。
In fact, his PC desk was covered with snacks. She cleaned it regularly, but it never seemed to make a difference.
運動だってしろって言ってるのに全然しない。
Suzuha realized she was complaining more than usual, but she had to say it anyway.
そんなんじゃ将来。
And then she realized Itaru wasn't even listening to her. His eyes were fixed on the computer monitor. He'd moved his mouse out of sight, but she could still hear him clicking it.
話を聞きなさい。
Suzuha approached her father from behind and put the hairspray can she'd been hiding up to his neck. Itaru seemed to think it was a gun. He stuck his hands up. Threats like this worked. They worked because she told him she'd survived the Third World War and the wars and chaos of 2036, and that she was ready to draw a gun and pull the trigger whenever she needed to.
Suzuha, やめてくんないと父さん怒っちゃう。
We know she's not going to kill him because that would create like a paradox, right? Like if her father dies before he can create her, then she won't exist.
怒られるのは父さんの方。
はい、すみません。でもさ、僕の秘密の仕事知ってるっしょ？あれが結構忙しいんだよ。僕ぐらいのハッカーになると引く手あまたでさ。食事も適当に済まさざるを得ないっつうか。海外のクライアント相手だと時差もあって昼夜逆転しちゃうっつうか。
未来の父さんもそんなことばっかり言って母さんに叱られてた。100歩譲って睡眠周期は仕方ないとしても、これ以上健康を損ねるような食事は許容範囲外。即刻中止すること。いい？
だけど仕事もそうだけどタイムマシンの研究が大変なんだ。癒しが欲しいんだよね、僕。
Oh yeah, the time machine. Well, I guess, yeah, he's gonna have to keep working on the time machine because she needs to be able to go back in time. If he doesn't create the time machine, then that creates another paradox because she wouldn't be here right now. It's so confusing. Man, time travel stories are always so confusing.
そうやって言い訳してすぐだらけようとする。甘えてるよ、父さん。
Suzuha was always amazed her dad managed to survive the future's wars, but since the time machine research would affect the future, and eventually Suzuha's very presence here, she couldn't tell him to stop. Even after Rintaro Okabe stopped coming to the future gadget lab, Rintaro had kept working on the time machine all by himself. Suzuha never said a word about it. If she did, it might create a time paradox. Yeah, exactly.
タイムマシンを作るのに未来から来たタイムマシンを精査しちゃダメだからね。
She decided to warn him again.
わかってるよ、そんなこと。でも時々自信なくなるんだよね。僕、本当にタイムマシンなんて作るん？
当然だよ。しっかりして。
はい。
Suzuha took the hairspray can off his neck.
てっきり銃だと思ったら、なんというはったり。父さんを騙すなんてひどいよ。
次は本物使うからね。
それマジ勘弁。
Suzuha put the can of hairspray back on the shelf. It was something Rintaro Okabe had left here when he lived in the lab. It was still here since its owner never came back for it.
漫画とかゲームだとさ、父親を叱る娘ってのはもっとこう燃えるんだけどな。Suzuha,ちょっとさ、もうダメだよパパ。って言ってみてくんない？できれば甘やかすような口調で。
How did he convince anyone to have a kid with him? I still don't understand. Especially if it's Yuki. Like, assuming it's gotta be Yuki, right?
なんでもないでござる。
Her dad shrank from Suzuha's glare. Suzuha sighed loudly and dropped herself onto the sofa. She leaned back against the headrest and stared at the ceiling, then closed her eyes.
どうしたん？
なんでも。
隠しても無駄なのだぜ。Suzuhaのなんでもないってのは話を聞いてほしいって意味っしょ。
え？
ほら、話してみるといいよ。
Daru sounded very serious. Suzuha's eyes went wide for a moment, but then she realized.
そのセリフ、この前プレイしてたギャルゲーにあったよね。
Who says that video games can't help you in the real world?
それでフラグが成立
Ah,
するんだっけ
flag. Flag, computer game lingo, a type of foreshadowing that means a common trope is about to occur. For example, an blank flag means that something in the future, X will happen. Death flags and love flags are common examples. She'd been living here for 3 months. She was starting to learn a little about Akihabara's culture circa 2010.
父さん、間違っても私を落とそうとか思わないでよね。
ねえよ、実の娘にそんなことしないって。
本当かな。未来の父さんはちょっと怪しかった。
え？
私が思春期になってからもよく一緒にお風呂入ろうって誘われたな。
Dude, really?
何それ怖い。
私は軍属だったし、
And he's not even like doubting that that's something he would do.
いつも一緒にいられるわけじゃなかったけど、とにかくベタベタしてきたよ。鬱陶しいくらいね。
God, Suzuha, I'm so sorry that this has to be. This is your dad. Her dad looked honestly depressed, and she realized she'd gone too far.
父さんはさ、いつも私に言ってくれてたよ。ここは最低最悪の世界線だけど、私が誕生したことだけは最高だって。
Aw, that's sweet. So she was joking about this stuff, but the sad thing is, like, I didn't doubt that that's something he would say, and even he didn't seem to be like, I would never say anything like that.
私、未来の父さんを失望させたくないんだ。だから、絶対にオカリンおじさんを説得しなきゃ。
大丈夫。失望したりしないって、絶対に。
そうかな。
うん。
けどね、おじさんはどうしても話を聞いてくれないよ。このままじゃおじさんは過去へ行かない。マキセ・クリスを救出しない。シュタインズゲートにも到達しない。
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is like, now that he has Kirisu on his phone, I feel like there's even less of a chance that he'll go back. Maybe that's the big thing, is like, the choices that I make will determine whether he just sinks further and further into just accepting the Amadeus Kirisu as like a replacement, so he has no need to go back, or he gets over it and he decides to, you know, try and actually reach the Steins Gate and get her back for real. Steins Gate, that was the name of the mysterious worldline her dad had told her about in 2036, where World War III might not occur. Leading Rintaro Okabe to that worldline was her mission. But right now it wasn't going well. Suzuha had come to 2010, and just like the mission had called for, she'd succeeded in sending Rintaro Okabe to July 28th. But then he had failed, and he wasn't going to try again. Every time they met, she tried to convince him, but who knew if her words were having any effect?
結局、第三次世界大戦に世界線は収束して、大勢の人たちが殺戮される。それを変えるために私は来たのに、何もできない運命なのかな。
Suzuha had something else she had to do here in Akihabara in December 2010 besides convincing Rintaro Okabe. And it meant she was running around every day. Is the thing that she needs to do. She's got to get the, there's that specific computer that they need or something, right? In like the IBN or something that in order to make the time machine. The exhaustion was starting to take its toll on her. During the war, she had been able to keep herself sharp at all times, and this level of exhaustion wouldn't have meant anything. The relaxed atmosphere of 2010 was actually making her realize how tired she was. She was feeling very sleepy right now, actually. She was surprised at how willing she was to fall asleep in such an undefended position, but she didn't think she could beat the temptation. And then suddenly she felt something extremely cold on the back of her neck. She snapped awake in an instant. Her movements after that were lightning quick. She jumped up and slid behind the massive body in front of her, which obviously belonged to Itaru, and grabbed his arm and twisted it as she dropped him to the floor. She went to draw the gun at her hip, and her hand swiped through empty air. And then she came back to reality. Her gun was hidden. She wasn't carrying it. This wasn't 2036.
いてててててて
2 cans of Dr. P clattered to the floor. That must have been what he had put on her neck.
何するの父さん。
さっきのお返しだお。
ぼーっとしてたから危うく殺しちゃうとこだったよ。そういう訓練受けてきたんだからシャレじゃ済まないんだって。
わかったから話してくだされ。言いたいでござるの巻。
まったくもう。
Suzuha let her father go.
いてててて
Itaru rubbed his arm and stood up, and grabbed the cans of Dr. P off the floor. He offered one to Suzuha.
つかさ、諦めんの早すぎだろう。もうちょっと頑張ってみるのだぜ。多分、オカリンは疲れて眠ってるだけだから、今みたいに冷たい毒ペでも首筋に当ててやれば飛び起きるんじゃね？なんせほら、あのオカリンだし。
She realized her dad was trying to cheer her up and nodded. Then she heard footsteps coming up the stairs and some slightly off-key humming. Their eyes met. Just the sound was enough to tell them who it was. Oh, that's gotta be Yuki, right? Because Yuki and Mayuri are coming to do the quiches, but she wouldn't have to hide if it was Mayuri. Suzuha moved fast. I guess, yeah, Yuki can't see Suzuha if that's her future daughter, right? That would create a paradox. Except the thing is that Mayuri was going to invite Yuki to the Christmas party specifically for Suzuha, so obviously they're not trying to hide her presence. Maybe even faster than when she knocked her father to the ground. She quickly and silently jumped behind the curtain that separated the lab's development room from the rest of it. Just as she hid behind the desk, or beneath the desk, there was a knock at the door. Suzuha knew that voice, of course. It was her mom. I mean, yeah, it was pretty obvious. She could tell from the noises he was making that her dad was panicking. There was another knock. I wonder if... Does Daru know that that is going to be his future wife? If that's the case, I can understand why he's, like, acting weird around Yuki. Like Yuki said, like, oh, he doesn't seem to like me. It's probably because he's stressed out. Like, oh, shit, I need to convince this beautiful woman to marry me and have a kid with me. He's got to have some serious riz. I don't know about if that's the case.
Hi, ima deru.
Itaru went to open the door. Suzuha took a deep breath and concentrated her mind. She'd remembered the time she'd spent 3 days and 3 nights on a battlefield with no food and nothing to drink, constantly aiming her rifle at the targets. She erased any trace of her presence that could give her away. Her breathing started to become shallow. Dad, don't screw this up, okay?
Amaneshi, 今日はMayushiと待ち合わせ?
Oh my god, her name... When they introduced her, did they say what her last name was? Amane? Oh, I'm so dumb if that's the case. How did I not make that connection right there? Her name is... Itaru came back into the room with the girl.
To
be fair to me, it's like I just see their first name and I kind of immediately forget their last names. She could hear plastic bags rustling. She must have brought the ingredients.
Mayushi 来てないんだよね。
そうですか。ちょっと来るの早かったかな。
Yuki Amane, goddamn. Just as the name Amane suggested, she was Suzuha's mother in the future. In other words, the two of them in the other room were supposed to get married.
まあ、約束があるなら、そのうち来るんじゃないかな。
待っていてもいいですか?
Her voice even sounds like her. I didn't even make that connection really until like you hear Suzuha talk and then you hear Yuki talk. They have kind of a similar voice.
もちろん。ここで料理もするんでしょ。
はい。橋田さんもぜひ味見してくださいね。
Mayushiのはあんまり食べたくないよ。
大丈夫ですよ。 まゆりちゃんすごく上達してるんですから。
へへ。
Itaru was clearly nervous. As far as Suzuha knew, the only girl he acted that way around was Yuki Amane. Suzuha and Mayuri were practically family, and he got along fine with big sis Rumi, Ferris Nyan, who worked at the maid cafe next door. So it wasn't that he didn't know how to act around girls, but for some reason he always acted different when she was around. She told him Yuki would be his wife someday. Well, that would do it. Can you imagine the pressure on this guy? Not only does he have to build a time machine, but he also has to convince this woman to marry him. That would be, like, the whole world depends on that. That is very stressful. It was too late to do anything about it now, but maybe that was a mistake, she thought. I think so.
今日は妹さんはお留守ですか？
え、
Oh, sister. Okay, so he said that Suzuha's his sister. That's what I was thinking. I was like, Yuki has to know that Suzuha exists. Especially if she's living here, right? Itaru Hashida's sister was none other than Suzuha herself. Around the same time Suzuha had started spending all her time in the lab, Yuki had become friends with Mayuri and Itaru and began visiting more frequently, which meant avoiding her was almost impossible, and so she was forced to tell Yuki she was Itaru's little sister. But still, she had wanted to keep contact to a minimum in order to keep Yuki from finding out somehow. That was why she was hiding.
そうそう、どうですこの服。この前買ったんですけど。
Look at her, she's even trying. Like, she seemed, when she was talking in the last episode about how, like, oh, I don't seem to be his type, he doesn't seem to like me very much, she seemed, like, genuinely disappointed, which is crazy. Like, she's actually, she's trying to get his attention. Yuki showed no signs of noticing Suzuha. She was twirling around in the center of the room as if she was at a fashion show. Yuki was a cosplayer and wanted as many people as possible to see her dressed up. Mayuri had told Suzuha that once before. In fact, Yuki and Mayuri spent a lot of time complimenting each other's outfits.
いいよ、すごくいい。
本当ですか？
うわー、天使来たこれって感じ。
ありがとうございます。橋田さんもおしゃれしましょうよ。ちょっとだけ痩せれば結構素敵だと思うな。私、本気ですよ。
That's all he has to do in the future. Just lose some weight and she'll be yours, and the potential world will be saved. Itaru Hashida and Yuki Amane. As she listened to their awkward conversation, Suzuha remembered the last time she had said goodbye to her dad. Nope. Alright, flash forward now.
父さん、治安部隊が万世橋まで来てる。
Okay, Mansebashi, one of the bridges on the south side of Akihabara that crosses over the Kanda River. The original Mansebashi was built in a different spot. When new Mansebashi Bridge was built in its current location, the old bridge became known as Old Mansebashi until it was taken down altogether in 1906. The bridge only came into its current arch shape after several rebuildings, including one after the Great Kanto earthquake.
ということは、ここが発見されるのも時間の問題かな。あらかじめ流しておいた偽の情報も効果なかったか。
急ごう。
おう、開けるぞ。
すごい。
Oh, and there's
こんな
Mayuri.
ところに扉があったなんて。これなら誰にも見つからないね。
さあ、中へ。
ここって。
Oh, wait. Who's that kid? What? That looks like... Hold on. That looks like, Kirisu. What is wait, hold on. I don't think this character was introduced before. I think she was in the opening, but... The room was almost totally empty and covered from top to bottom in soundproofing materials. They just keep throwing new characters at us. I guess it makes sense. Not only were there no windows, there wasn't even a door to the hallway. I like how Mario is wearing the exact same outfit that she's wearing in 2010. She looks exactly the same, and this is 26 years later. Sounds the same, too. The building they were in was once a symbol of old Akihabara before it was almost entirely destroyed by an air raid during the last days of the Third World War. Only a few people knew about the secret room inside it. The biggest reason was its secrets. The silhouette of what looked like a satellite sitting in the corner.
これタイムマシンだよね。これがタイムマシン。カガリ、危ないからあんまり近づくな。
Okay, so that's the kid's name. I don't think she's ever been mentioned before. Suzuha spoke to the little girl clutching Mayuri's hand. Most of the children in this era had skin inflammation somewhere in their body from all the radioactive rain, but she didn't. Her name was Kagari Shina. That last name's familiar. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm really bad with the last names. Wait, is that Mayuri's last name? Her registration form said she was 10 years old, but no one knew if that was true. She was an orphan who had lost her parents in the Tokyo air raids when she was a baby, and nobody knew her birthday. The name Kagari had been given to her by Mayuri, who was working at the child welfare center that had taken her in. She took it from the word Kagaribi? I'm so sorry. Meaning bonfire, and hoped she could be a light even in these dark days. It had been 4 years since Mayuri had adopted her, and her name on the registration form, had become Kagari Shina. Kagari.
綺麗だね、ママ。そうね。
Suzuha monitored for the Shinas to step back and put her right hand and right eye up to the time machine sensor. The biometrics check cleared and the hatch slid open. Biometrics, the use of fingerprints, voice recognition, vein, iris scanning, etc. instead of a password. But why does she look so much? I know it's just because she has long red hair and blue eyes, but I'm like, why does she look so much like Kirisu? There can't be any sort of... There can't be like a connection there. It's like, what if it was Okabe and Kirisu's daughter, like 10 years old, right? So 20, so this is 2036. I'm just trying to do would that work? Except no, if that's the case, if Kirisu, she survived, then World War III wouldn't be happening. So confusing. Anyway, I'm thinking too much. I gotta stop. Okay. She went inside and fastened herself into the seat. She probably just looks like her. Probably no relation.
技術的には全く問題ない。これまでのテストジャンプ通りやればいいからな。
Okie dokie.
Suzuha began to flip switches, working her way through the startup procedure. She'd practiced it hundreds of times in preparation for this day. The faint rumble from the machine began to get louder.
データによれば、昔のラジカンはちょうどこの場所が屋上になってる。ただし、高さが1メートルほどずれてるからな。着地するときに衝撃があると思う。
了解。
The time machine could move through time, but not space. To arrive at the radio building more than 60 years in the past, she needed to launch from right here.
トラブルが起きても冷静にな。トレーニングを思い出せばいい。
大丈夫だよ。私は父さんのマシンを信じてるから。
Her words must have meant a lot to him because he stuck out his lips towards her. She squished them back with her hand. Don't be
気持
weird.
ち悪い。
Why? Why, Daru? Why are you this way?
鈴葉は父さんが嫌い。
Ugh. So maybe the stuff that she was talking about, like in the future you want to take baths and stuff with me. Maybe that wasn't too far off.
父さんがやるとなんか下心があるみたいだから。
いくらなんでも娘相手に下心なんてねえよ。
最近母さんに似てきたハスハスとか言ってたのはどこの誰？
Her mother wasn't here. She'd become a victim of the war, brutally killed by the peacekeeping squads.
冗談を真に受けないでくれたまえ。
なんだ、冗談だったの？
Suzuha's voice sounded kind of disappointed. She set the destination for August 13th, 1975. Her first mission was there.
これでよし。それじゃあ父さん、マユ姉さん。
She was about to say her goodbyes, but then...
屋上からだ。 突入してくるぞ。
思ったより早い。
Suzuha drew her gun from her holster. She was about to get out of the time machine, but her dad stopped her.
ダメだ。さっさと飛べ。
でも父さんたちが。
俺たちのことはいい。早く行け、鈴葉。
そんな、だって。
マヤシ、かがりちゃんを。このマシンにはもう一人乗れる。
Oh shit, wait, so this kid's going back in time? Mayuri and Suzuha's father picked up the stunned Kagari and stuffed her into the time machine.
すずちゃん、かがりをお願い。わかった。
Wait, okay, I'm trying to think of like all the characters we may have met. I'm sure there must be a reason for this, right? Like we're gonna maybe encounter her at some point in... So she went back to 1975 first, and then she went to 2010. So I wonder if we're gonna meet Kagari at some point. Suzuha's mission succeeded, and the worldline... I mean, we must, right? There must be a reason this kid is going back in time with Suzuha. And yet Suzuha's never mentioned her. Suzuha's mission succeeded, and the worldline would be rebuilt, and it was likely the present Kagari would cease to exist. It might have been pointless to send her, but even so, a mother wants her child to live. That's how Suzuha's mom was, too.
Mama.
Kagari finally seemed to understand what was going on. She called out to her mom.
やだよ。いや。大丈夫だよ。かがりちゃん。すずちゃんが一緒だから。ね。ダメ。ママも一緒じゃなきゃダメ。過去へ行けば。昔のママがいるよ。今よりずーっと若くて。かがりちゃん。
I mean, Mayuri seems no different at all. You don't see her face, but still. Mayuri handed Kagari a tiny keychain. It looked old. It may have been a brightly colored green once, but now it was completely faded. Oh! The Upa! Didn't, Okarin, Okarin, I'm calling him Okarin. Didn't Okabe, he won that for her in, like, the little capsule machine. It's, like, super rare. It was, like, right at the beginning of the original game. That's so cute that she kept it all this time. The mascot character of the Reinet Kakeru anime, a dog-like virtual pet with an egg-shaped cylindrical body and short, stubby arms and legs. Comes in many different colors. It can't talk, but it can communicate by crying Upa or Upa. Once it was pressed firmly into Kagari's hand, she stepped back. Mayuri was smiling, but weeping at the same time.
いや、行きたくない。ママと一緒にいる。ママ、ダメ。かがり、おとなしくしてなさい。
Kagari fell silent immediately. Even Suzuha had never heard Mayuri use the tone of voice. That's how harshly she scolded her daughter. Kagari was quietly weeping, unmoving.
閉めるぞ。
This time the hatch really did begin to close. The inside of the machine and the outside of it. The two worlds were about to be completely cut off from one another. Whether Suzuha's mission was successful or not, she would probably never see any of them again. And then the door was sealed shut, and Mayuri and Yutaru's voices disappeared along with the chaos outside.
父さん、大好き。
She whispered towards the door, now sealed shut.
行くよ、かがり。かっこいい。
She booted up the time machine.
橋田さん、掃除機はどこ？
Suzuha snapped back to reality. Yuki was getting closer to the development room she was hiding in.
そのカーテンの危なっ
この奥？
ああ、僕が持ってくる。
Itari motioned for her to stop, then quickly slid into the room. As he reached down to pick up the vacuum off the floor, his gaze locked with Suzuha's as she hid under the desk.
バレないようにしてよ、父さん。
オキドキ。
Oh, it's so cute that she probably got that okie dokie from him.
ありましたか？掃除機。
あ、うん。
Or maybe he got it from her. Either way, cute. Evidently, Yuki was trying to be nice by cleaning up. The place was pretty messy right now. Knowing Yuki's personality, Suzuha could imagine she'd want to clean it. Itaru grabbed what looked like a vacuum cleaner off the floor and left the development room.
何ですか？それ。
未来ガジェット5号機。
Once again, I've made a worthless object. Alright, let's check this out. Future gadget number 5, the future gadget of your dreams, made by connecting a dryer and a vacuum. It uses the exhaust from the vacuum in the dryer. The name comes from the famous anime about a phantom thief, Lupin's III.
分解すれば普通の掃除機として使えるはず。
お掃除するための掃除機なのに、分解したらかえって散らかすことになりません？
あう。
橋田さんって頭がいいのに時々うっかりなことしますよね。
そうかな。
でもそういう人の方が私好きだな。
Oh my gosh, she's just coming right out. He doesn't even have to do anything. It's wild that she's into him so much.
なんだと。
Itaru started to panic again, and Suzuha sighed. He's like, the fate of the world rests on him being able to... I mean, he doesn't seem to have to do much. She seems to like him, but he just has to not fumble the bag.
お部屋の掃除はできれば毎日した方がいいですよ。ここ特に埃っぽいですし。それだけじゃありません。食事のこともそうです。今日もカップ麺だったんでしょ？
Like mother, like daughter, right? He's probably like, God damn, I'm just surrounded by nagging women.
なんで知ってるん？
お台所に食べ残したまま放置されてます。
なるほど。
それにお菓子もこんなにたくさん。食べ過ぎだっていつも言ってるのに。
一応気をつけてはいるのだぜ。うん。
一応じゃダメです。あんまりカップ麺やお菓
They
子ばか
already
り
are
食べ
acting
て
like
る
an
と
old married
病気に
couple.
なっちゃいますよ。あと少しは運動すること。
No.
Yuki Amane was saying the exact same thing that Suzuha just said. Perhaps they really were mother and child. Suzuha was just beginning to feel a little homesick when she sensed another visitor approaching. The door to the lab opened and a greeting she'd heard many times before resounded throughout the room.
ごめんね、ユキさん。ちょっと遅れちゃった。
It was Mayuri coming to see Yuki, but there was another presence there too.
まゆりちゃん、こんにちは。岡部さんも一緒だったん
Ah,
ですね。
Okabe showed up. Oh, I wonder if well, no, Suzuha's hiding. She can't have that talk with him right now. Oh man, he does look rough. You'd see the bags under his eyes. Yeah, dude looks tired.
ああ、久しぶり。
When she heard his voice, Suzuha ground her teeth a little. Oh, and we got Kirisu.
興味深いわね。
なんだって？
聞こえなかった？興味深いと言ったの。
まさか行きたいとか言い出すんじゃないだろうな。
ぜひお願い。
話すべきじゃなかったな。
I was standing in the middle of Ikebukuro with a smartphone in one hand, staring up at the sky. I've been trying to talk to the Amadeus Kirisu as much as possible lately. Sometimes I would contact her, and sometimes Kirisu would contact me. It didn't feel any different than having a friend who lived in the real world. Talking on a smartphone in a crowded place like this was a little embarrassing, but I told myself that compared to the things I used to do, it was nothing. I'd chosen harmless topics for our discussion, but it still reminded me so much of talking to the old Kirisu that I sometimes forgot myself. I'd done that just now when I accidentally told her about the lab. Oh, okay. She had seized on it, so that's why.
あんたが今話したそのラボ、オリジナルの私は行ったことが？
ああ、いや。
はっきりしないわね。どっち？
ないよ。
Kirisu had been part of the lab in the Alpha worldline. In this worldline, she died before ever becoming a lab member. Of course, she'd never even known where it was.
お前は勘違いしているようだから言っておく。ラボと言ってもラボじゃない。ただのお遊びサークルだ。それに
Suzuha was living there right now, and Daru spent a lot of time there. If they found out about Kirisu, things could get complicated. Oh yeah.
言いかけてやめないでほしいわけだが。
I'm assuming they will find out about her eventually.
なんでもない。
いずれにせよ、外の世界をいろいろ見て回ってみたい。今までは先輩や教授と話す時も研究室の中ばかりだったから。
だからこうして日曜の朝っぱらから池袋を案内してやっているだろう。
10 a.m. Even at this hour, the area in front of Ikebukuro Station was crowded. And it was going to get even more crowded as it got closer to noon.
なんなら乙女ロードまで連れて行く覚悟はしていたんだけどな。
何よそれ？
お前の知らない世界が広がっている場所だな。
待って、今調べた。
本当に興味が湧いたか？
そんなわけあるか。とにかく今日はあんたのラボに連れて行ってよ。私に話して聞かせた以上責任を取りなさい。よろしくね。
And hang up before he gets a chance to rebut. And then she hung up. It was like I was her own personal taxi service. Kirisu couldn't move around on her own, so there was no getting around that, but...
まったくわがままなやつめ。
She didn't seem to think very highly of me. At this rate, she might start treating me worse than a servant. The real Kirisu was one thing, or no, maybe it wasn't, but being treated that way by the artificial Kirisu was incredibly humiliating. Wouldn't it be a humiliation for all of humanity?
これはなんとかすべきかもしれん。
As I mumbled to myself.
あれ？オカリ？
Mayuri called out to me. She was carrying a lot of bags. It was probably materials for one of her costumes.
ねえねえ、今誰かと話してなかった？
今大学のゼミの友達だ。
そっか。今日も遊びに行くの？
いや、今日は別に予定はない。まゆりはこれからバイトか？
ラボでユキさんと待ち合わせ。
ラボ。
Was this good timing or bad timing?
そうだ。オカリンも久しぶりに一緒に行かない？ユキさんの手料理も食べられるよ。それとね、マユシーも頑張って作る予定なのです。どうかな
？Oh my goodness. Old times. There's the, it's the CRT store downstairs, right? In the end, I went with her.
ずいぶん嬉しそうだな。
嬉しいよ。
Mayuri had been smiling the whole time, but I was the opposite. The minute I got here, I was so nervous I felt like I was about to throw up. I didn't really want to see Suzuha.
あ？おう、岡部じゃねえか。
お。
Hey, there he is. The door to the Braun Tube workshop on the first floor opened, and out came the building's owner, Yugo Tanuji.
店長さん。
His daughter's name was like Nae. It was like Nae, right? We'll probably see her at some point. Brawn Tube Workshop, a CRT TV shop located on the first floor of the multi-purpose Ubiyama building in Sahirocho. At the very back of the store is a very rare 42-inch CRT TV. Yugo Tanuji, the owner of the store, also owns the building. It only gets a few customers a day, but strangely enough, it's been one of the few stores that has survived over the years in the constantly changing landscape of Akihabara.
Oh.
T シャツ1枚で寒くないですか？
鍛えてるからな。
When I'd been living in the lab, I'd given him the nickname Mr. Brawn. It'd been a long time since I'd seen him.
Okabe, その様子じゃちゃんと大学生やってるみたいじゃねえか。
どうも。そういえば家賃ってどうしてるんだっけ？
Right, I was just about to say it. I'm like, if he hasn't visited the lab, who's paying the rent? I asked Mayuri instead of him. I used to give it directly to Tanoji, but...
橋田がちゃんと振り込んでくれてるから安心しな。
Look at that. I mean, I guess he has to, like, Daru has to be working at this specific place for the time machine, right? He's got to try and keep things as close to the old timeline as possible.
そうですか。
おう。
This man. Was he around her in this world line too? Oh, that's right. Oh my gosh, all these things I forgot about. There was no way I could ask him. Oh, let's check here. Oh, Maho Hiajo. How did things go with Kirisu? No problems. I see. Anything you can tell me, no matter how small, would be a big help. That she's interested in Maiden's Road, maybe? What's that? A place where a whole world you know nothing about exists. Wait, I'll look it up. Bad idea. That darkness is very deep. If there's anything that seems off, I'll let you know. Would you? I know it's a lot of trouble. Please and thank you. I was wondering if I could bring up Amadeus when I want to, but I guess not. I couldn't help but be wary of him. That's why I started to put some distance between us. If nothing else, I'd avoided trying to interact with him.
じゃあね、あんま暴るんなよ。
Tanuji saw that I'd gone silent and went back inside. Mayuri looked over at me with a worried expression.
大丈夫？やっぱり帰る？
行こう。
Tanuji didn't matter. What mattered was, why was I here? Did I feel like something needed to change? Or did I really want to show Kirisu the lab? I went up the stairs, still unsure of the answer. Maybe somehow Kirisu will be able to help them, even through, like, the Amadeus program. If she comes to the lab, maybe she meets everybody. Mayuri went in first.
ちょっと遅れちゃった。まゆりちゃん、こんにちは。
I peeked inside the room. Daru and Yuki were there. Their eyes went wide when they saw me.
岡部さんも一緒だったんですね。
おう、オカリン、久しぶりじゃん。
ああ、久しぶり。
It's so sad how, like, obviously everything has affected him, all the events, but compared to the first game, at the beginning of the first game, to here, where it's like he's just been so beaten down. I quickly scanned the room. There was no sign of Suzuha. Part of me was a little relieved.
入っても
自分のラボで遠慮とかねえよ。
それもそうか。さすがにこの状況でクリスを呼び出すことはできなさそうだな。
I followed Mayuri to the lab and tried to relax my legs by sitting on the couch, but I didn't feel relaxed at all. It felt like my skin was crawling. I glanced over at Yuki.
ゆきさん、そのお洋服かわいい。まゆりちゃんにそう言ってほしくて着てきたんだよ。
That's the exact same outfit that she wore yesterday.
いいなぁ。まゆしんも着てみたいのです。後でお洋服取り替えっこしてみる？サイズ合うかな？
I'd heard about Yuki's future from Suzuha, too. I still couldn't believe someone this pretty was going to marry Daru, right? Right? Oh. Ooh, Amadeus is calling. Ooh. Can I shouldn't, right? Call from Kirisu. Ooh. I'm not going to. I'm not going to answer, because the whole thing was about not answering the phone. Even Daru seemed to share that opinion. That's how much of a miracle it was. Yuki and Suzuha really did look similar. There was no doubt that she was Suzuha's mother. But still, Daru seemed to be having trouble with her. He'd send lots of messages complaining about how he didn't know how to deal with it. Were things perhaps starting to go wrong? If the world lines converged, the two of them were going to marry no matter what. Oh, okay. I ignored Kirisu's call. That's interesting, so I wonder what would have happened if I had picked up there. I was sure she'd complain later, but there were some things I just couldn't help. And then I saw an old vacuum lying on the floor. What was this thing, I asked myself, and then I realized that it was future gadget number 5. What was it doing here? I put all the future gadgets in the back room. No one was planning on cleaning with this thing, were they? We'd McDivered it to the point it didn't work as a vacuum anymore. McDiver. Originally, this referred to the act of stripping off the clothes of a female figure whose clothes were never intended to be removed. From there, it came to mean any sort of customization that was far, far removed from the designer's original intent. Some figures, by the way, include clothes that are intended to be removed called cast-offs. This does not count as McDivering. I should put it away. I took gadget number 5 to the back room. It felt even messier than it had last summer. Most of the new stuff belonged to Daru. I could see a lot of anime, computer games, pre-order bonuses, art books, and figure boxes. But there was also a lot of parts and machines I didn't recognize. Was Daru really working on the time machine?
僕は一人でもやるよ。鈴葉と約束したからね。
Just once, Daru and I had something like a fight over the time machine. I could still remember his exact words. It was rare for Daru to be so forceful about what he was thinking. Did I just hear something? There it was again. Oh, Suzuha. Oh, that's right, because he's stepping in where Suzuha is. Oh, they're going to have an awkward chat.
Oi, Daru! Nezumi ga... Oh! ネズミじゃなくてガラガラヘビか？
ヘビってなんだよ、ヘビって。おじさん、静かに。
I knew that voice. I could sense someone there. Someone was moving around under the desk. I leaned down and fearfully took a peek. There was Suzuha.
Oh.
What was she doing here? And then Daru walked in.
またネズミとか迷惑すぎる。
Uh-oh. I tried to push Daru out, but it was too late.
やだ、ネズミがいるんですか？
Uh-oh.
ネズミ？ヘビ？どこ？
Mayuri and Yuki were peeking out from behind Daru's back.
鈴葉さん？どうも。
次のニュースです。明和党の駒沢康和衆議院議員が企業から不正献金を受けていた問題で、駒沢議員は今日10時から記者会見し、議員辞職する意向を表明しました。
Someone left the TV on and it was playing the afternoon news. Suzuha knew no one was watching it, but she used the remote to turn the volume up anyway. She wanted to keep the girls in the shower room from hearing us. I could hear Mayuri and Yuki laughing from the shower. Things had gotten really awkward when Yuki had found Suzuha, but Mayuri quickly came up with a plan. At first, her plan was for the three of them, including Suzuha, to shower naked together, and hopefully get Yuki and Suzuha more comfortable around each other. Oh, Mayuri. But Suzuha said the shower room was too small for 3 people and refused. Let's get the future mother and daughter together naked to get them more comfortable with each other? What? What?
参ったな。
Suzuha was staring up at the ceiling.
鈴葉のせいじゃないよ。オカリンが悪いんだ。
誰が事前に教えてくれなかったからだろう。
教えるタイミングなんてなかったじゃん。オカリンがいきなり。
もういいよ2人とも。私が迂闊だっただけで誰も悪くない。
そもそも彼女から隠れる必要があるのか？すでにダルの妹で通っているんだから、こそこそする方が逆に怪しまれるだろう。
Suzuha had tried to avoid Yuki to begin with. Just meeting her father was enough to potentially cause a time paradox, she said, and that chance went up even more if she met her mother. But Yuki had found her before long, and Suzuha had been forced to say she was Daru's little sister. Yuki believed it, so why make things any more complicated?
そうなんだけど、母さんが思った以上に私と仲良くなりたがるんだ。あまり会話しすぎるとボロが出かねない。
自分とよく似てる人間が現れたら、嫌悪するか興味を示すかのどちらかだろうな。
And Yuki Amane was the latter.
嫌われた方がずっと楽だよ。
いっそ事実を打ち明けるわけにもいかないか。
Right now, only a few people knew that Suzuha was a time traveler. Me, Daru, Mairi, and Ferris. That was all.
つうか、
Not
この
Luca,
まま
huh?
何も説明しなくて
So
いいん
Ferris
じゃね
kept the memories, or did they just tell her for some reason?
天音氏はなんつうか、秘密とか無理に聞きたがるような人じゃないと思うんだよね。鈴葉ならよくわかってるんじゃないか。
確かに未来の母さんはそんな人じゃなかったけど。
じゃあ大丈夫だって。いずれ時が来たら僕からちゃんと説明しとくよ。
本当？
ああ。
わかった。父さんに任せる。
Suzuha nodded.
で今後は天音氏を露骨に避けるのやめるっつうことで。
うまくやれるかどうか自信ない。
大丈夫だって。
お前が言うなって話だけどな。さっきだって相変わらず苦手意識出しまくってたじゃないか、お前。
僕のことは今はどうでもいいっしょ。
And then the conversation came to a halt, which meant we started thinking about the voices coming from the shower room.
つうわけで。
Daru opened his mouth. Perhaps he couldn't take it anymore.
ニコ生見てもいいかな。ブラチューの生特番があるんだ。
Okay, I was thinking it was going to be something about the shower. It's like, I have a camera in there or something. Can I go take a peek? Bloodtoon, an anime called Bloodtoon the Animation. Originally a manga, it was animated last year. The show drew a lot of attention from anime fans, and the main heroine, Seira Orgel, became popular enough to have many figures. Nico live streaming, a live streaming service offered by the major streaming site Nikonia Video.
不許可って言っても視聴するんでしょ？じゃあどうぞ。
Suzuha sighed, and Daru sat in front of the PC and put his headphones on.
何？おじさん。
いや、仲のいい親子だと思ってさ。
そうかな。
ああ、未来でもダルはこんな感じだったんだろ。
もっと痩せててかっこよかったけどね。
想像もつかないな。
So I guess he did lose some weight to get Yuki. Although in the flashback he looked pretty similar. Maybe once, I hate to say it, once Yuki passed, maybe he just kind of went back to his old self. And the conversation died again. There were a ton of things I needed to talk to Suzuha about, but that was why I couldn't say a word. Maybe it was the same for her. Since there was nothing else to do, Suzuha and I turned back to the TV. The news was still on.
今日東京銀座でフランスのファッションブランドル・パラディのオープニングイベントが行われました。
As the newscaster spoke, I could see over 100 women lined up in front of a store.
平和だね。私が物心ついた頃にはすでにこんな光景は存在しなかった。
On the TV, a girl in a pretty outfit was talking to an interviewer.
羨ましいな。彼女たちは誰も殺さなくていいし、誰にも殺されないんだね。私が育った時代はさ、相手が男だろうと女だろうと容赦なく殺さなきゃいけなかったんだ。
A little bit of maybe unintentional guilt tripping, being like, this is the future I was trying to avoid, but you couldn't do your job, so now we're heading that way.
次の瞬間には自分の命が終わるかもしれない。そんな恐怖が寝ても覚めてもつきまとってた。恐怖を忘れるためには狂気に身を任せて自分が殺す側に回るしかなかったよ。
That was war. That was Suzuha's life. I'd been to many nightmarish world lines, but none of them were that bad.
父さんたちはタイムマシンのことで反政府組織とみなされてね。
Daru had made the time machine that brought Suzuha here. It was far more powerful than the one that existed in the Alpha world line.
私も軍から離脱して父さんたちに加わったから警察や治安部隊に追われることになった。それからは
Any mention about that
もっとも
girl?
っと
The
ひど
little
い戦
girl?
闘が何度もあったよ。正義のための戦いなんて綺麗な言葉は使いたくない。たくさん殺したし、友達や仲間も大勢殺された。その中には私の母さんもいた。
Daru was still staring at the computer screen, but I could see him twitch. He must have been listening to Suzuha while he was pretending to look at the screen.
軍の無人機から私を守ろうとして機銃掃射で死んだよ。
This was the first time I'd heard how Yuki Amane died. She was in the next room right now, having fun in the shower, and that's how she was going to die?
この目でズタズタにされていく母さんを見た。この全身で母さんの生温かい血を浴びた。
Damn, Suzuha, she is gonna be a real downer at the Christmas party if she's talking like this. I know she won't, but holy cow. Maybe the reason Suzuha didn't want to talk to her mother in 2010 was that she didn't want her asking about the future. There was no way Suzuha could tell her that.
ねえ、おかりおじさん。
At some point, Suzuha's eyes had started to overflow with tears.
この世界線の行き着く先は地獄しかないんだ。今すぐじゃなくていい。時間切れにはまだ少しだけ時間があると思う。だからもう一度だけ考えてお願い。お願いだよ。
俺は
I knew it. In my mind, I knew it. The right thing to do was to do as she asked. But
死にたくないよ。
the sensation I felt when the knife slipped into her flesh, I took the life of the girl I loved. It went from my hand to my arm and then to the rest of my body. I started shaking. My vision blurred and then almost went black. My hands went to my mouth. There was a wave of pain like my stomach was turning inside out.
おじさん、
大丈夫か、オカリン。
悪い。
Suzuha poured me a cup of water and I gulped it down.
ごめん。こんなことまだ話すんじゃなかった。
いや、大したことない。大丈夫だ。
I sank into the sofa and tried to calm down.
鈴葉の言いたいことも気持ちもよくわかるんだ。けど俺は何度も 世界線を漂流してきた。こことは違う世界線でタイムマシンに運命を翻弄される人たちを見てきた。
I looked straight into Suzuha's
お
eyes.
前の非業の結末さえ見てきた。俺自身もそれに巻き込まれて何もかも無力だってことを知った。
Humanity was powerless before the laws of this world.
タイムマシンを使って世界線を改変するのはこの宇宙の仕組みから逸脱することだ。俺たち人間が手を出していい領域じゃない。いわば神の領分なんだ。それに触れれば俺たちはもっともっと残酷な罰を受けることになる。俺はそう思う。
それがオカリンおじさんの答えなの？
少なくとも今はな。
そう。
ただの逃げだとなじってくれてもいい。
ううん、そんなことしないよ。
Suzuha looked up at the ceiling and sighed. That must have been a habit she picked up lately.
続いてのニュースです。厚生労働省はアメリカで猛威を振るっている新型の脳炎ウイルスについて、今のところ日本国内での発症例は報告されていないと発表しました。ただこの新型脳炎は潜伏期間が長いことから、すでに国内に上
Oh
陸
boy,
している
here's a
可
new
能性
thing.
も
This
否定
is
でき
probably
ない
going to affect us. And who just came from the US but Maho and Dr. Leskinen? So now we've got a potential virus?
感染症法に基づき、全国の医療機関に対して新型脳炎対策と感染症発生動向の速やかな調査を指示しました。ここからはお茶の水医科大学の春山壮子教授にお話を伺います。春山さん、この新型の脳炎というのは具体的にはどのような症状が出るものなのでしょうか？
新型脳炎は感染力は弱いのですが、潜伏期間が長く突然発症します。症状としては、
Oh, cool. Hallucinations and memory problems. I'm probably going to be affected by that because I've been in contact with people who are from the US.
例えば、そうですね。会社で仕事をしていたはずなのに気がつくと家にいたりですとか、会ったこともない人に会った記憶があるというような症例が報告されています。
Okay. And the thing is, too, is depending on how it's transmitted, because they say that, like, it's not easily transmitted, but if we go with this timeline, maybe Kirisu had it as well. Maybe it's spread by blood. Maybe when she bled all over, Okabe, maybe he got it and he doesn't realize it. But either way, so this is something that's probably going to come into play.
あとは実際には発生していない事件が起こった覚えがあるなどといった記憶の混乱も現れているようです。
Oh, I wonder if maybe that's what Mayuri's friend had, because she's having hallucinations and she had like memories of events that never occurred, but I don't know, those are events that we know happened in the other timelines, and I was wondering, like, how does she have those images in her mind?
夢と現実の区別ができなくなったり、時間感覚を失ったり、周りの人と記憶が一致しなくなるので錯乱状態に陥ったり、
This is just going to make things even more confusing.
いわゆる寝ぼけているような状態、デジャブのようなものと言えますが、もっと症状がはっきりしています。
Deja vu, the name of a strange sensation in which you feel that you've been through a situation before, even if you know you can't possibly have done so. The sensation is strong and realistic enough that it cannot simply be attributed to forgetfulness or imagination. But since you can't remember when or where you experienced it before, it creates a strong feeling of unease. The cause of this sensation is still unknown. One theory says it is the result of an extremely rare but temporary disjunction between the parts of the brain that govern recall, and memory. Another theory says it is the result of a temporary spasm of the hippocampal gyrus.
治療法についてはいかがでしょう？
他の脳炎と違いまして、適切な治療を受ければ比較的速やかに完治することが分かっています。ですので、もし国内で感染者が出たとしても、それほど恐れることはないと思いますよ。
The reporter was still talking, but I couldn't hear what she was saying. The information I just heard was that shocking. a new kind of encephalitis. I knew the symptom she was describing, losing the ability to discriminate between dreams and reality, losing your sense of the passage of time. Your memories no longer match those of the people around you. That was exactly the same as reading Steiner. So there's like a bunch of people getting reading Steiner-like symptoms around the world. $1975. Okay, so this is her going all the way back, so she's going to have that little girl with her. Kagari. The interior of the time machine smelled like metal and was covered in instruments of different sizes. The girl inside was sobbing. It had been almost an hour since Suzuha had left to go look around. She'd assumed Kagari would stop crying by then, but she'd had no such luck.
いつまで泣いてるつもりだ。しっかりしなきゃダメだ。まゆ姉さんの気持ちを考えろ。
Kagari Shina looked up at Suzuha, her face wet with tears.
だから泣くんじゃない。鬱陶しい。
Suzuha walked over to Kagari and knelt down so they'd be at eye level. She had no intention of spoiling her. Her goal was to save billions of lives, and this was her first mission.
いいか、これからはカガリもワルキューレの一員とみなす。私の部下として扱う。非戦闘員じゃないからな。
That's a lot to put on a little girl who'd never asked for any of this. Valkyrie, demigoddesses from Norse mythology. There are many Valkyries, and at least several dozen are given names. They chose who will die in the battlefield and who will be victorious, and they take the souls of those who fought bravely to Valhalla to prepare for the coming Ragnarok. Skuld, one of the three Norns and the goddess of the future, is a Valkyrie.
ここは1975年だ。知ってる人間は誰もいない。父さんもマユ姉さんも出生してない。つまり誰も守ってくれないんだ。自分の身を守るのは自分だけだと思え。いいな。
Kagari was a brave girl, and she finally realized that now wasn't the time for tears. She tried to stop crying. It wasn't working well, but it was a lot better for her emotions than sobbing. She was a smart girl. Suzuha knew that.
あまり時間がない。この時代の人間にタイムマシンが見つかったら大騒ぎだ。
The machine had landed on the roof of the radio building, which wasn't a spot that people visited often. The chances of anyone finding it were slim, but in this era they had no one to help them conceal it. That meant they couldn't stay long. She needed to finish her mission quickly and move to the next time period.
何か失敗したらまたタイムマシンで時間を戻ればいいんじゃないの？燃料の問題があるんだ。ジャンプできる回数は無限じゃない。肝心の場面で動作しなかったら話にならない。そうなんだ。立てるか？
Suzuha stepped out of the machine and beckoned to Kagari. Kagari looked surprised. Her eyes were narrowed at the bright sunlight. It's gotta be weird for her to be in a world where there's no war. The sky above Tokyo in this time period was too dirty to be called blue. Smoke and dust clouds filled with who knew what were rising from the row of smokestacks. It all combined with black exhaust from the cars that scurried along the ground to create a smog so thick you could literally see it. The sky above the city was covered by a veil of death. But still, it was the first clear sky that Kagari had ever seen. She'd only ever known from books and videos the sky could be this bright. The nuclear weapons used during the Third World War had changed the weather over Tokyo, and her sky was constantly covered in dull gray clouds. The sun's light was always weak when it shone through them, and it was never this bright. She's gonna lose her mind when she goes back to 2010. I'm assuming that, the environment looks a lot better, like they cleared up a lot of the smoke and everything.
私が子供の頃はまだこんな感じの空だった。少しだけど覚えてるよ。
Suzuha looked up at the sky too.
空気が美味しい。
In 2036, you needed a filter and mask to go outside for any length of time. Compared to that, 1975 was a lot cleaner.
わかるだろ、カガリ。父さんたちがどうして世界線の改変に全てをかけていたのか。世界線がどうとか、歴史がどうとか、そんな理屈は後でいい。今はただこの空の色を守りたいと思えば。
Kagari slipped her hand into her pocket and took out the faded green Upa keychain. She stared at it with a sad look on her face. She was probably thinking about Mayuri, her mother, and she was probably trying to understand what it meant that her mother had put her inside the time machine. Suzuha decided Kagari was all right now and closed the hatch on the time machine from the outside. The lock flipped on automatically. The only person who could open it now was Suzuha, whose biometrics had been loaded into the system ahead of time. Even if someone did find the machine, it would be a while before they found out what it was.
Kagari, これを見ろ。
Suzuha handed her a printout of a photo. Okay, so she's going for that IBN thing. That's what she needs.
IBN 5100っていうレトロ PC だ。
IBN 5100, IBN's first portable computer which went on sale in 1975. The design includes an integrated monitor and keyboard, and while it's described as portable, it weighs almost 25 kilograms. In the 2000s, John Titor revealed that there was a special computer language that could only be used on devices of this type, which was not described in the manual. IBN's developers would later admit that it was correct, or he was correct.
私たちの時代に存在していたものはどれも満足に動かない。けどこの時代なら感動品が入手できる。これを手分けして探すのが私とお前の最初のミッションだ。連絡はこれで。
She handed Kagari a small transceiver.
通信できる距離はかなり短いらしいから気休め程度だと思え。オーキードーキー。
Okie dokie.
90分ごとにこのビルの前に集合。状況を確認。それを繰り返す。いいな。オーキードーキー。いい返事だ。
Suzuha nodded and patted Kagari on the head.
よし、ミッション開始。
Uh-oh, did she not come back? Suzuha was on top of the radio building in 2010, looking down.
35年。
Did she lose her during that time? Like something happened and she couldn't bring her to 2010? That's how long ago it had been in real time since she had spoken to Kagari here. From her perspective, it had only been a few months. The view from up here had changed a lot since then, and in the next 26 years it would change even more. She'd seen for herself how this building changed over a span of 61 years. The thought didn't make her feel sentimental. Instead, she felt the loneliness and fear that comes from having a past not shared with anyone else. Using the time machine to change the world lines means breaking the rules of the universe. Rintaro Okabe's words flashed through her mind. Still, lately, she'd been thinking more about Kagari. She'd been searching the city at regular intervals. She was looking for Kagari Shina. She didn't even know if she was in Tokyo. She had no clues. She didn't even know what Kagari looked like now. So maybe it was a waste of time. Even so, she had to find Kagari herself. But she hadn't had any luck today. She turned around and looked toward the time machine. She'd come here every day. Her primary reason for coming was to see if her father, Itaru Hashida, had been here. Anytime she let her guard down, he would come to try and examine it. She told him it would cause a time paradox, but he didn't listen. She needed to keep constant watch. To be honest, she had a lot of things she had to do. And then she heard the metal door to the roof open. Was it her dad? She squinted into the darkness, but the person she saw was much smaller than Utaru, and had cat ears coming out of their head. Ah, Ferris!
にゃにゃ、いたいた。すずにゃん、こんばんはだにゃん。なんだ、ルミ姉さんか。
Ferris Nyan Nyan had a spring in her step as she approached Suzuha.
ルミ姉さんって誰のことかにゃ？フェイリスはフェイリスにゃ。ルミ姉さんはルミ姉さんだよ。
Ferris's real name was Rumiho Akiya. She was Daru's friend and had helped them in many different ways in 2036. So Suzuha had known her ever since she was very young and had always called her Big Sis Rumi. For whatever reason in this era, she always wanted to be called Ferris, though. When Suzuha asked why, she simply responded, "Ferris is Ferris, nya," an answer which meant nothing to Suzuha.
ラボに誰もいなかったからこっちかなと思ったら正解だったにゃ。はい、差し入れ。余り物で悪いんやけど。
Ferris showed her a cake box with a logo from the maid cafe where she worked, Maid Queen Nyan Squared.
父さんがラボに不在でよかったよ。
If he ate something like that at this hour, he would get even fatter.
ダルニャンじゃなくてスズニャンへの差し入れにゃ。私に？なんで？にゃふふ、好きなくせに。
Ferris grinned and nudged Suzuha on the side with her elbow. This is Operation Make Suzuha
私
Smile.
は別に。アップルタルトにモンブラン、あとイチゴのショートケーキもあるにゃ。ほら、おいしそうだにゃ。
Ferris opened up the box and showed her what was inside. Suzuha could smell the sweet cream and fruit.
さあ、今すぐおいしく食べるといいにゃ。
Poor Suzuha.
心置きなく食べる
She's
といい
so
にゃ。
stressed about like everything she has to do. She's not allowing herself any like happiness or comfort.
ほら、あんして。その可愛いお口に食べさせてあげるにゃん。冷蔵庫にしまって明日食べる。すずにゃんはストイックにゃ。
Ferris laughed and handed over the box.
賞味期限は明日だから明日中に食べなきゃダメにゃぞ。ありがとう。どういたしまして。
Ferris gave her a mischievous wink and looked up at the time machine beside them.
ダルニャンのタイムマシン研究の方はどうかにゃ。頑張ってはいるみたい。ルミ姉さん、このマシンまだここに置いておいても？
Suzuha looked around the roof as she asked. It was solely thanks to Ferris that no one had really noticed the massive object on the roof. She was the heir to a rich family that had a lot of influence in the area and had contributed a lot to the development of Akihabara. She was helping to hide the time machine. Like their thing is like, let's just put a giant partition. Nobody will find it.
オーナーさんには体感ゲームの研究をしてるって言ってあるにゃ。ちょっと苦しいわけにゃけど。助かるよ。気にしないでいいにゃ。この世界のエレメンタルを売薬兵たちの魔の手から救うためなら、フェイリスはいつでも協力するにゃ。
Byaki, winged interstellar creatures that appear in the Cthulhu mythos. They were created by August Derleth, the co-creator of the Cthulhu mythos, along with H.P. Lovecraft, and appear in such stories as The House on Kerwin Streets. They are described as being chimera-like creatures around 3 meters tall, with the wings of a pterosaur, the legs of an eagle, and a tail like a bee's. Despite their terrifying appearance, they understand human speech, and if they feel it's in their best interest, they can even work together with humans. In space, they usually travel at around 1/10 of light speed, but an organ called the hoon in their tail allows them to fly faster than the speed of light. The Byaki are supposedly servants of Hoster, the god of shepherds, a creation of Ambrose Bierce, author of the famous Devil's Dictionary. Damn. 4 elementals, the 4 spirits that control the elements of earth, water, fire, and air. Their existence was first proposed by the Swiss alchemist Paracelsus in his book, The Book of Fairies. He's described them as being not dead like ghosts, but not alive like humans, and as being spiritual creatures of an extremely nebulous nature. Paracelsus struggled to explain exactly what they were, and in the end decided to classify them as things. He divided them as follows. The element of earth is controlled by the pygmies of the mountain or the gnomes. The The element of water is controlled by the nymphs of the water or the undine. The element of fire is controlled by the salamanders of the fire or the Vulcans. The element of air is controlled by the sylphs of the wind or Sylvestris. Pericles' theory had a huge effect on alchemists and authors both of his own and later generations who filled in the gaps in his work. In the fantasy genre in particular, elementals have become mainstay. Whew, that was a mouthful.
そう。昔から、いや、今からしたら未来か。思ってたんだけどさ、ルミ姉さんの話って時々すごく難しくなるんだよね。一体何考えるんじゃない。感じるのにゃ。いいやいいや。寒いにゃ。フェイリスはお家に帰ろうかにゃ。
In the end, she never could get an answer. To Suzuha, Ferris was always a great mystery.
送っていくよ。一緒に出よう。いや、それじゃあついでにうちでご飯も食べていくといいにゃ。そういうつもりで言ったわけじゃないんだけど。どうせ普段大したもの食べてないにゃ。
Just like her dad, I guess.
ストイックさを見てると、フェイリスがなんとかしてあげにゃきゃーって思っちゃうにゃ。保護欲？母性？とにかくそういうのがかきたてられるのにゃ。私は大丈夫だから。
Before she finished her sentence, she felt someone looking at her. She glanced around.
にゃ、どうしたのにゃ？
She listened carefully. She definitely heard a very faint sound from the direction of the metal door that led to the stairs. It was small enough that Suzuha was only able to notice it because of her training.
誰かいる？にゃにゃ。
Yeah, yeah.
話を聞かれた。
I mean, Ferris is quite loud. Most of the discussion was worthless, but they had talked about the time machine a little. If somebody heard that... Oh, what's this? Suzuha yanked her gun out of her jacket and in an instant ran towards the stairs as fast as she could. She heard someone running down the stairs as soon as she did. The sound, heavy military boots in a wide stride, got farther and farther away. Ooh, is it the Rounders? Maybe the return of the Rounders. She opened up the door and jumped onto the landing. Then she raced down the stairs, skipping 3 steps with every stride. But still, it wasn't fast enough. Suzuha was born fast, and she'd been trained to be faster, but it wasn't enough. When she finally made it to the 2nd floor, she could hear the loud revving of a motorcycle. Maybe it's Moeka again. I mean, why would they reintroduce Moeka like at the beginning? We saw her very briefly, and haven't heard from her since. She panicked and slipped on an object that had been left halfway up the stairs and rolled her way to the bottom. She managed to get into the right position and protect her head so it was her hips that struck the ground. She forced herself to stand up and run outside. She could see the tail lights of a large motorcycle speeding away. The driver was wearing a black helmet and riding suit, and already a good distance away, so she couldn't even tell if they were a man or a woman. They revved their engine loudly as if to mock her, and spun a corner and disappeared onto Center Street. A little later, Ferris caught up.
大丈夫かにゃ？逃げられた。それ、しまった方がいいにゃ。
She put the gun in her hands back in her jacket holster and brushed away hair that sweat had stuck to her brow.
今の誰にゃ？わからない。けど、一般人じゃない。訓練されてる。と思う。訓練？階段に何か落ちてなかった？バッグが転がってたにゃ。ちょうど死角になる位置だった。多分わざと落としたんだよ。しかも私がそこを通るタイミングでエンジンを空ぶかしした。見事に引っかかったよ。トラップってことかにゃ。ああいうことがとっさにできるっていうのは特殊な訓練を受けてるからだ。じゃなきゃ無理。
Suzuha glared in the direction of the bike disappeared and started to think. Who was it? CERN? There was an unofficial CERN group, the Rounders, that were searching for IBN 5100s in Akihabara. Rintaro Okabe had told her that. But he'd only encountered them in another worldline.
誰かはわからないけど、私たちの他にタイムマシンのことを知ってる奴がいるのは間違いない。
Was it that they knew about it but weren't going to do anything more? Or did they intend to steal the time machine from her? Since she didn't know, she had to assume the worst, or she wouldn't be prepared to deal with it. She looked up to the sky and sighed. It was becoming a bad habit.
ねえ、ルミ姉さん。このことは、オカリンおじさんには内密にしておいて。なんで？今のオカリンおじさんが知ったら、タイムマシンを破壊しろって言いかねない。危険だからって。でしょ？そうにゃけど。私は絶対にマシンを守るよ。シュタインズゲートの入り口へオカリンおじさんを連れて行かなきゃいけないんだから。それが未来の父さんとの、私をここに送り出してくれた人たちみんなとの約束だからさ。すずにゃ。わかったにゃ。その代わりダルニャにだけはちゃんと話しておくこと。オキドキ。
The last part was almost a whisper as her words melted into Akihabara's sky. Alright, so that is going to do it for this episode. So a couple of interesting things. You know, we've got Daru trying to romance Yuki, because if he doesn't, then there's going to be a time paradox. Lots of time paradoxes going on. We've got the whole thing with this virus that might be breaking out in Japan that causes hallucinations and senses of deja vu and memory loss and things like that. I'm sure that is going to be important. And we have a potential new group that could be another obstacle in this whole thing about getting to Steins Gate, whether they are the Rounders or a completely different group. I'm not too sure about that, but intriguing that we're going to have, you know, some antagonists going on. Yeah, so interesting about that, and with the whole thing with Mayuri's friend seeing the premonitions of her death. Except I'm not sure if they're premonitions because that was on another world line. Is that maybe a sign of things that she could still die in this timeline? Is Mayuri just fated to die again? And the fact that Suzuha wants to keep this a secret about this group that might be onto them with the time machine. That might cause some problems too, so we'll just have to see. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned next time for episode 4. Until then, bye. Special shoutouts to my top tier patrons: Emily Hornsby, Zorn Ether, Revealing Storm, Asborn Kennedy, Icognito, Harry Gazif, and Jared Fan.